This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for showing up this afternoon, everyone. This is sort of a coming out event for me in some respects. When I was a kid, I was a herpetologist, and I'm still a herpetologist. And my interest in herpetology, that is the study of reptiles and amphibians, really stood me in good stead throughout my botanical explorations, looking for native plant germplasm that could be used to convey or impart stress tolerance, especially in urban trees. So this is my former graduate student, Lou Anella, and we are collecting red maple seed in the George Washington National Forest. And Lou's paying attention to what's going on in the trees and everything. And I'm looking around on the ground, and this is what I see. What is this? What is this? And I've got the name up there, and I can't make this up. This is about 3 meters away from where Lou was standing, and I said, Lou, you got to see this. Okay. Who remembers this guy? Oh, yeah. Yeah. He just changed his Facebook page, opening picture. This would be a really good one, too. Look at the curiosity. Look at what he's looking at up in the sky. Anybody remember the tree that he studied for his dissertation? Horticulture paniculata. Very good. You look down on the ground, and what do you see? You see the Japanese mamushi. And I just got an email 2 weeks ago from Michael saying, I just came back from Japan, and guess what was all over the place? We've got these Gladius species that are all over the place. So they are both the mamuchi and rattlesnakes are pit vipers. Okay, who recognizes this guy? He didn't show up. He was going to show up today, but I guess he has more important things to do. Here we are in Patagonia looking at a roadside shrine for San Expedito, the patron saint of travelers, really. And, you know, it's pretty cool. They're all over the place. And Kevin and I were down there testing out his drone, looking at different ways that we could look at vegetation patterns in Patagonia. And of course, I'm looking around and turning over rocks and stuff. And what do I see? Wow. So is this a fertile ants? The fertile ants is the most deadly snake practically in the world because it's cryptic, it's hard to see, relatively small. People step on them and get bitten, and they're dead meat. Okay, so I thought, well, you know, this line here has me a little bit concerned. Maybe it's not really a Bothrop species. So I sent this picture to Harry Green, who, as many of you know, is a retired herpetologist from Cornell. And Harry Green says immediately, yes, you know, steer clear of these guys by all means. And then an hour later, I got another email from him saying, I sent this picture to my colleague at the University of Argentina who says, no, this is a mimic. It is not a fertile ants. It's a pseudomotodon. And he said, this is especially embarrassing to me because I wrote the monograph on mimicry in Bothrop. So anyway, in addition to avoiding potential lethal or at least inconvenient kinds of interactions with reptiles, my interest in herpetology has given me this other kind of collegial conversation that I can have with people that, who knew? You know, I don't have a colleague at the University of Argentina, but through Harry, now I do. So anyway, that's my, I don't try to keep this candle under a basket, but it's maybe a little known fact unless you've hung out with me in the woods and in swamps and things like that. So this computer doesn't have the new, doesn't have this new font, which I saw in an article in Science 2 weeks ago, and I thought, this is great. You know, something other than Times New Roman that I can use. But I want to, why did I not become a herpetologist? To no small degree, it's because of my freshman botany professor, John Morrison, from the College of Environmental Science and Forestry, or what used to be the College of Forestry at Syracuse. And among other things, John had a captive Massasauga rattlesnake in his office in the late 1960s. So when I went in to see my freshman botany professor to ask about a question on an exam or a quiz or something, bong, here's this snake. So I figured, this is a person to pay more attention to. John's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he got his PhD at UC Berkeley, and he monographed the genus Streptanthus. How many of you are familiar with Streptanthus? What family is it in, Robert?
Gesneriaceae.
It has been changed, has it not? Streptanthus was in Brassicaceae.
Oh, I'm thinking Streptocarpus.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the beginning of knowledge is calling things by their right name. And that's one of the things that I learned from John. You know, because here you're learning all this weird new stuff about cells and plants and leaf anatomy and all that. Call stuff by their right name. And it's really easy to miscall something in an environment like this, a collegial environment. It's really easy to figure out what's really going on, and that's important. So I'm going to read something. In 1938, when John was a graduate student, he participated in the Goodspeed expedition to the Andes. And this was a plant exploration kind of thing. And what do you suppose they were looking for? They were looking for wild germplasm to improve an important crop plant. Anybody have any idea what they were looking for? They were looking for wild-type Nicotiana species. This is what the world was like in 1938. So there's this book called Plant Hunters in the Andes. However, John was delegated to ride on this little schooner called the Iris and go to these offshore islands, offshore from the coast of Peru. And so I can't remember the name of the island that they were aiming for, but this is the same island that Robinson Crusoe was stranded on. And if you've ever read Robinson Crusoe, it's a pretty bleak, desolate place. So one of the things that I learned from John that I didn't really understand that I was learning from him until I reread this chapter many years later comes from John's verbatim account in Plant Hunters in the Andes. The little schooner had a most amazing spiral gyrating motion, which was absolutely devastating to one who had been to sea on sizable craft and usually fair weather. Okay, the ship would rise like an elevator, a long steep slope of a great wave, and when the crest was reached, it would lunge downward. Wow, and smash, go crash, okay? With the dawn of the second day, I gathered a little courage, attempted to sit up, drink a glass of water, eat a few raisins. By the morning of day 3, I gathered the necessary strength and fortitude to go into the cabin for breakfast. Okay, so more on this later. We're in a really challenging time, both globally and as the human race, in the context of global change and global climate change and everything that goes along with it. This is from a recent article in Nature, and it's showing areas of the globe that are relatively unimpacted directly by human impact. So these are on terrestrial areas, and then these spaces out here in the Pacific Ocean include the Galapagos Islands, about 630 miles off the west coast of South America. If you want to see these places, independent of the impact it'll have on your carbon footprint, time's kind of running out. And one of the things that I wanted to do, both because of all of the herps that you find on the Galapagos Islands, but also because of a recognition that maybe it wouldn't be like this forever, I wanted to go to the Galapagos Islands. And my dear wife, Mary Ellen, who, in spite of the fact that she knew that all of the horses that had been released had subsequently been killed on the Galapagos Islands to minimize their impact, she's a horse person, an equestrian person, the same way I'm a herpetologist. She agreed to come along too, and we had a very nice time. So if you want to see relatively untouched places, the time is now. So here we are. Here's Ecuador. Here are the Galapagos. The Galapagos are part of the nation of Ecuador. And we got to the Galapagos by way of Quito, the capital of Ecuador. And this is the Basilica del Norte, or del Noto, excuse me. And this is one of multiple churches in Quito. Quito is at about 9,600 feet. And it's really steep and a little bit oxygen deprived. If you look closely at this basilica, what do you see? You see one of the gargoyles in the shape of a Galapagos Island iguana. So even in Quito, you're sort of being prepped for what you're going to see. This is the kind of stuff that I read when I was a kid. So what's a herpetologist going to read? Well, you know, you might read stuff by Darwin, but also, and Darwin was an adventurer for sure. So was Thor Heyerdahl, who wrote Kon-Tiki and Aku Aku. So as a fourth and fifth grader, I was reading stuff like this, and I ran across things like, here we have, this is from Aku Aku, America, the Inca's forerunners had thrown the door open of the Pacific and paid repeated visit to the remote. Now, at the time, I said Galapagos. You know, I mean, I was 10 or 11, so I called it the Galapagos. So I've wanted to go here for a long, long time. Now, I got some feedback from people who were saying, you know, what Darwin missed, boy, what kind of a, what's wrong? Well, that's just disrespectful, you know? And here is what Darwin says. Although I diligently try to collect as many plants as possible, I succeeded in getting very few. And such wretched little weeds would have better become an Arctic than an equatorial flora. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? I raise my hand and say, Charles, you were correct. You didn't miss anything because guess what? There was relatively little there. And this is what I saw. This is some of the stuff that I saw. Anybody, can anybody identify this? Is this a, I'll give you some hints. Is this a grass, a sedge, or a rush? Grass, yeah, okay. So there is some grassy stuff on the Galapagos. So Darwin's not alone by any stretch of the imagination. I had been to deserts. These are the Pinacotes, which is a volcanic desert, much like the Galapagos are, in Sonora, Mexico. And look at all this green. If you were to look at the surface here, you would see these lava pebbles, this desert pavement. And there's a lot of green stuff here, right? And cholla cactuses and acacias. And Kevin said he was going to give me a hard time, so I came equipped to give him a hard time too. He's not here, so I can't. What's this purple plant, this carpet-like plant in bloom in the Pinacotes? I won't tell you. So you get to the Galapagos, and this is what you see. There are many different kinds of cactus and something like 24 different species of opuntia cactus, including some that get up to about almost 10 meters tall, tree opuntias. This is a candelabra cactus. And then here is looking out at the larger landscape, and there are a lot of plants, but everything is brownish and gray, right? Interesting. This is a map of Santa Cruz Island showing the different climate zones. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Heinrich Walter's Atlas of World Climate Types, I highly recommend it. It's an enormous book, and he has these climatodiagrams here that show things like relative temperature differences and rainfall and so forth. The stippled zone here, this is month, and there are a variety, one's temperature, one is rainfall, etc. But the stippled zone is the relative period of drought, right? So, it's a desert. You've heard of desert islands. This is a desert island for sure. And Baltra is one of the islands in the Galapagos archipelago. So Darwin visited during the Guara here. He was here in September and October. When did we go to visit? We went in October. And this is the dry, cool, cloudy season, but there's not a lot of rain. It's a dry season. In contrast, the rainy period in winter and spring is not only rainy, the black lines here, but it's also sunny. So if you want to see plants, go in the winter. If you want to stay dry, go in the fall. So any questions about that? Okay. And in addition to the seasonal difference, there is a southern, this is the south, and a northern kind of gradient. We've got the Humboldt Current coming up from the south, and it's much rainier there. And this is an exaggeration, but in addition to the rain, you get a lot of drip, condensation on leaf surfaces and drip underneath. If you go to the north sides of the islands, the arid zone goes almost all the way to the pinnacle. So it makes a difference when you're there and where you are exactly. So how would I suggest that you prepare? How many of you went to see Rosemary Grant last year when she talked about the work that she had done with Galapagos Island finches over in Roberts Hall? Nobody went. Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Deb. Okay.
ATW, your winter and fall are our winter, not theirs, right?
That's correct. Yes, I was speaking. We are at the equator essentially, so winter and fall are a little bit sketchy there because we're right on the equator pretty much. But thank you. So The Beak of the Finch by Jonathan Weiner chronicles the 40 years that the Grants have studied finches. And depending on how you want to call the shots, there are either 14 species and another 10 subspecies, or maybe 24 different species of finch that are mostly distinguished by their beak dimensions. I would also suggest you read the chapter from Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle about the Galapagos, and a book. This is a pocket-sized book that it's a field guide kind of thing. I would suggest that you look at that so that you're at least primed for some of the things that you might see. There are a lot of families that are not especially common if they occur at all at our latitude. So, and this is not only plants, but also animals. So what should you take? If you take nothing else, you should take goggles and a snorkel. You should take sunglasses, and even though we were there during the non-sunny season, there were times when it was quite sunny and the sun was quite intense. So take some high-powered sunscreen. Take a notebook, and this is Right in the Rain, but it's sturdy nevertheless. Here's the wildlife book. Spend a fair amount of time on airplanes. So I read The Voyage of the Narwhal, which is this great documentary novel about looking for the Northwest Passage. And take a camera. I'll talk about this in a minute. I took, at the advice of Harry Green and Kelly Zamudio, I left my arsenal of interchangeable lenses and my big Nikon camera at home, and I took a relatively simple but sophisticated point and shoot. Something that has a GPS capacity, so that, see, this is where I took this picture, looking towards Seymour Norte. Something that has GPS and it can give you your exact location for reconstructing things. How many of you have GoPros? Any of you have GoPros? Okay, a few of you have GoPros. Really great for taking underwater photographs. So I highly recommend making that kind of investment. So here we have the trip. We took the Western Galapagos trip. We got into Baltra, and typically the times when you're traveling are at night. And we were there for, how many days were we there? 8 days? 8 days. Ken Mudge and his wife just did the Eastern trip. And anyway, it's a fascinating kind of place with all these islands, and you've got all of this volcanic stuff, obviously. And this is the boat, the Reina Silvia. And I want to call your attention to these portholes here. We had a below deck cabin, and looking out the porthole, this is what you see. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, I get to see wetness on my windows all the time, but not water right outside my window. This is the group that we were with. We were on a small boat, 90-foot long boat, and there were 12 passengers and another 6 or so crew. This is Franklin, our tour guide. So you land, and this is sort of what you see. There are these very conspicuous cinder cones, and these are active volcanoes for the most part. And here is the group walking across a lava field to one of our early stops.
Yeah, there is plant material in that shot.
There is plant material in that shot, yes. Yes, it's not that there are no plants. You just have to pay attention. And the tour guides are really focused on moving you from one spectacular view of a magnificent frigate bird or a giant iguana or something like that. So if you want to take pictures of plants, you can see where was I? I'm always at the back of the group because I was taking pictures of plants, right? Okay, so we're in this young landscape that's dominated by lava. And for those of you that are familiar with the Hawaiian vernacular, this is pahoehoe lava. It's this ropey stuff that when it was cooling, it was this ropey plastic mess, and it's really, really fascinating stuff. I want to make a point, which I'll make a couple times. Clothing is really important. Wear long sleeves, but also flip-flops are okay, but not when you're walking around on stuff like this. So don't wear your flip-flops. And you could spend hours just taking pictures of all of this stuff here. And the detail is just totally fascinating. Okay, this is lava, which looks more like sandpaper. It doesn't have the ropiness. So what do you see here? Anything stand out? Anything jump out at you? Volunteers? This is a large painted locust. So here I am saying, oh, this is kind of cool, wildlife. And then watch what happens. Bong. This lava lizard goes running out of his little crack in the lava and nails this guy. And I understand that I've had similar experiences like this. A number of years ago, I was walking down Tower Road and a sharp-shinned hawk nailed a pigeon right in front of Furno. And everybody else walking the other way was doing this and missed this predation event. And I just heard from Marvin that a couple nights ago, what was seen on the lawn in front of Furno?
It was at least a 12-point buck, but it was dark, so it's hard to know exactly.
A 12-point buck. So pay attention to stuff, even in the dark, and you'll see really interesting stuff. Okay, we'll talk about plants a little bit. This is Gray's Manual of Botany. And in, we'll say, 1.8 million square miles of North America, east of the Mississippi River, there are about 5,500 species of plants, give or take. Here we have a much smaller area, about 3,000 square miles, and there's 642 species. But these are the two spines of the books. There are maps in here, there's some drawings and things like that. So you might, I wouldn't advise taking this with you, but you might want to look at it before you actually go. So I figured, well, I'm reasonably comfortable with the flora of the eastern US. 5,000 species, 600 shouldn't be a problem at all, right? Okay. So 642 species. Look at the number of endemics, things that occur only on the Galapagos Island, 228. And we have recent introductions, 77 recent introductions. So more than 10% of the species are recent introductions. Great place to do a PhD on invasion biology for plants. You might want to think about that, those of you that are looking for PhD careers.
I have no clue why that happened.
What did I do?
Your time's up.
My time's up. Okay, so just to, here we've got the islands and the number of plant species that are on those islands. Many of you have probably heard about MacArthur and Wilson's book, Island Biogeography. This is a representation of birds on the Sunda Islands, square miles area, numbers of species. And you get this really nice linear relationship on this log-log transformation. This is the way the Galapagos deviate from this usual pattern. And this is a very confusing caption here. Plants of the Galapagos species area curve. The ordinate is the total number of bird species. There's something weird about this paper. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's a departure here. There's a departure here. You don't have the strong linear relationship. And the paper goes on to say the Galapagos form an exception. The degree of isolation is the dominant factor and area is only a minor one. Okay, everybody knows about iguanas, and this is, I'm going to run through some pictures of things that you have seen. This is a land iguana. Here's another land iguana. These guys are very, very tame. They're not threatened by you at all. You can come right up next to them, really. These are marine iguanas. And unlike the land iguanas, they tend to be gray, although there is a rose form that I'll show you in a minute. And there are literally thousands of them all over the place in the coastal zone. And here is one of the rose morphs of the marine iguana, and another one. And, you know, I took about 4,000 pictures. To reduce them to the 4,000 that to the 2,000 that I'm going to show you this afternoon took quite a bit. And here we have a marine iguana, and look at the trail these guys make. So there are lots and lots of things to capture your imagination and attention. Where you'd think with all of these mature 1 to 2 meter long lizards that there'd be all kinds of eggs and nests and little guys. Not really. And I felt very fortunate in being able to find cite this one. And of course, the whole group came back to actually take pictures of this. And I was glad that I had a telephoto lens because I could sort of get it from a little bit of a distance. Everybody else on our crew pretty much had cell phones. So you've got everybody down on their hands and knees within 2 feet of what's being shown, taking cell phone pictures. Okay, and these guys actually do swim. And this is an example of one of the reasons why you should have a snorkel and a mask. The iguanas are quite happy to share their territory. And this is looking at them at one of the iguanas swimming from underwater. What do they eat? They eat algae. That's pretty cool. And look at this landscape. This is just a fascinating landscape here. There are about, 50 different species of seaweed or algae there that are a story in and of themselves. I didn't take many pictures of giant tortoises, but there are many giant tortoises and a bunch of different species with different kinds of shell shapes. And for those of you that some of you probably know this, but Galapagos in Spanish means something like saddle, does it not? So these were called Galapagos tortoises because their shells actually resemble saddles. These are short fin pilot whales. These are guys that are about the size of orcas, and there are a lot of them, but they tend to be, a couple hundred meters away from you. So having a camera with some zoom capacity is really kind of nice. This is a giant manta ray, and this guy's probably 4 meters across. Again, some distance from the actual boat, but it's like something that you see on TV. So being able to see stuff in the flesh, so to speak, that you have only seen. Is it really white? It is white underneath.
Oh, that's the underside.
That's the underside, yeah. So this hasn't been Photoshop doctored or anything like that. And you saw lava lizards and grasshoppers that were sort of colored to blend in with the lava. These are Sally Lightfoot crabs, and they are anything but camouflaged. And these guys are just all over the place in the intertidal zone. Yellow-crowned night heron. There are a fair number of these too. And, you can probably come within, 6 or 8 feet of them. American flamingos in some of the interior embayments. Just fascinating critters and very picturesque. You could easily spend a whole day just taking pictures of these guys. Here's a brown pelican, and it's young, eating out of the mother's pouch here. I don't know if this is the mother. This might be a male. I can't tell the difference, quite honestly. And Galapagos penguins. They are quite happy to share the road with you as well as you're swimming. Great frigate birds. These are males displaying, saying, come and have a build your nest with me. And here we see a frigate bird with one of the young. Flightless cormorants. These guys are all over the place swimming in the tide waters as well. You could not take this picture unless you were taking a video. So if you have an HD GoPro and you're taking videos, you know, you've got 1,000 shots and you pick the one that has this exact moment. And then look at this. This is amazing. These guys are very curious too. And here is a golden cownose ray. Did you see any of those, Ken? Okay. So definitely things that are in the water, below the surface of the water. And this is stuff that Charles Darwin missed too. I don't know if he could swim or not, but he didn't snorkel, that's for sure. Galapagos sea lions. These guys are all over the place and also very tame and really beautiful. And this is a Galapagos green turtle. This just as easily could have been a sea lion swimming around and around and around Eve here. So the herps and the avian representatives of things, in addition to the fish, which I'm not going into at all today, are really fascinating. Okay, now, things that catch your eye. This is a yellow warbler, right? And he's in the intertidal zone on this lava. And we've got algae growing here, crustose seaweed growing here. And so I'm taking a picture of one of these guys and trying to follow it. Where is he now? You see him? He's up there, right. What's in the center of the screen? Who's this little guy? This is one of the finches. And what the grants have spent a lot of time doing, with a great deal of legitimacy and hard work, certainly, is looking at the way rainfall patterns change the seed coat of caltrop species. That's the common name. And they're these really hard, spiny seeds, which, by the way, I didn't see because they were all gone when I was there. But it's all about big beaks being able to crush hard shells. So here's what the finches are doing. Huh. What am I doing?
I have no clue.
Huh.
It's the gremlins in the system.
So on the sandy beaches, this is gray mat plant, by the way, and we see these finches eating gray mat plant. And this is a Heliotropum species. This is what the inflorescences look like. And for those of you who are not familiar with heliotrope species, they have scorpioid cymose inflorescences, really fascinating. Heliotropum curasavicum, okay, scorpion weed. And these are the inflorescences with the fruits on them. This is what the seeds look like. And that's what they come out of. So relatively small, crackable, you know, you don't have to have a big beak to get at those things. And you can see one of the seeds here in the beak of this medium ground finch. So there's a lot of stuff that deserves some more attention there related to finch speciation. And look, they're eating algae in the intertidal zone as well. And that's pretty fascinating. So I would say, if you're a finch, why are you up here in these areas, in these upland areas where the vegetation is so dependent on rainfall? Heck, come down and eat algae. And this is Parkinsonia, and they're eating the fruits and seeds from this fabaceous tree. Where do you suppose you see the most finches? Where? At the airport in Baltra, where people are throwing down peanuts and all kinds of stuff. And there are just thousands and thousands of finches there. And I don't know that anybody's really, there are signs that say don't feed the finches. But, you know, is finch beak morphology and natural selection determined by what they're getting in the Baltra airport? Hard to tell. Lava lizards, some of them have these really bright colored undersides. Here's another sea lion. This is Tequila nesiotica, the gray mat plant, and this is in the borage family, another thing with scorpioid cymes. This is an acacia species. Check out the thorns on this. Man, you don't want to go walking around in shorts, especially at night, you know. This is, check out this flower. I was looking for flowers. This is bitterbush, and one that actually had some leaves on it and some flowers. This is in the Asteraceae, the composite family, Darwiniothamnus, and it's one of its common names is Galapagos rosemary, even though it's not related to rosemary. Here is Galapagos cotton, and these are the fruits, and you wouldn't mistake this for anything else. It looks very much like our temperate cottons. And this isn't from the guidebook. This is I actually found a flower. It's in the Malvaceae, for those of you who are familiar with the Malvaceae. Here's another asteraceous thing, Pectus, and look, 1, 2, 3, maybe 6 flowers there. If you look carefully, you do see the flowers. And these are the different leaf shapes for an arborescent woody asteraceous tree, really, in the genus Scalazia. And I thought, oh, this will be great. I'll take pictures of all these different leaves. Well, I was able to find some representatives of Scalazia helleri, and you can see that these are the senescing inflorescences. And this is chordata. This isn't. This is the chordate-leaved one, and you can still see some flowers here or some florets on this. So indeed, Don, there are lots of plants, but you've got to pay attention to seeing the plants. And we spent a couple hours one afternoon at some of the higher elevations, and this is a bromeliad, and I don't know whether this is a synonym for Tillandsia. The flora of the Galapagos are from the early 1960s, but Racinia. And you might recognize this as bearing some resemblance to pineapple. This is something in the Apocynaceae, Valesia, bitter berry. And there are a lot of things in the aster family. And these flowers are fairly conspicuous here. The leaves are diminutive. And this is something in Sterculiaceae. We don't have a lot of Sterculiaceae in this part of the world. But it's a shrub, again, with yellow flowers. Another view showing a little more of the habit. And then beach morning glory. And this is a, let's see, it's in Convolvulaceae, it's in the Ipomia genus. And look at all this stuff. I asked Franklin what this was, and he said it was a parasitic algae that had been introduced. And I said, I don't think so. This is dodder. So there's dodder all over the place on this stuff. And that too is fascinating if you're interested in looking at unusual plants that we don't see much of in this part of the world. Okay, so I want to end with two notes. One is the Galapagos are really a great place to go. And if you're looking for kind of a manageable adventure, it's certainly a fascinating and fantastic kind of trip. This is from the Dr. Seuss book. So great opportunity to illustrate your excursions to kids. And one of the things that I try to teach my class, especially in restoration ecology, I'm going to just raise my voice. What you wear is analogous to a tool, okay? So I wanted to respect my audience and have some credibility, so I wore a tie, and but that's not the only kind of thing that you might want to wear all the time, and especially from a pedagogical perspective. There are many things that you might want to.
Now's a good time to dim lights.
Now's a good time to dim the lights. Okay, so my kids over the years have been in the habit of giving me T-shirts for Christmas, and T-shirts especially that they think might have some pedagogical value. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Who can read what this T-shirt says? What does it say?
Eschew obfuscation.
Eschew obfuscation. What does that mean? Is it accomplishing the message it's trying to convey? Anybody know what it means? Yes, Deb.
Means be clear.
Means be clear. So, you know, saying eschew obfuscation is kind of accomplishing exactly the opposite thing. And I've done essentially this lots of times in my class, in my classes. So I want to kind of leave you with the charge of as you are studying things, and as you are pursuing your passions, and as you are communicating your findings, eschew obfuscation. You know, try to make things clear. And that's especially important these days because the stuff that's going on that, I won't use any names, but we, you know, people that think they are sufficiently smart that they can disband the President's Council for Scientific Policy Making and things like that, because I understand all this stuff and the science is wrong anyway. We really need to be very compelling and effective in the ways that we communicate things. So on that note, I will stop. And I think I still have
Answer questions.
There might be some time for questions.
Great.
Thank you for your attention.
Was the daughter native or was that invasive?
The dodder is actually native, as described in the flora of the Galapagos. So, Irene.
Just that observation is really curious to see a night bear in such an exposed location.
Right, right. They are, you know, the night herons that we have around here, you'd expect to see pretending to be a typha stem or something like that, but they're not introduced or anything. But yeah.
Tom, do you want to ask Geneva if they have any questions?
Sure. Geneva, do you have any questions?
I think we're all set. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
I was looking at your pictures of frigate birds compared to ours on the east side. Yours had those really cool looking red pouches.
Right.
To attract.
Yeah.
We saw lots of frigate birds, but none of them had the red pouches. And so I guess that relates to the effect of geography on timing.
I think it's timing of the display. I mean, when they deflate, they're just these cryptic black things with whitish beaks, So I think it's all, are they seeking mates or what? Yeah. And there are two different species of frigate birds too, so there might be a little bit of a difference there as well. Any other? Yes.
Why did you choose to go in October?
Well, my official last day as a Cornell employee was the 30th of September, and I wanted something that was a big exclamation point, kind of punctuation mark. So 10 days later, we left for the Galapagos. That was one reason. And we also went with another couple, a geneticist and an immunologist. And this is when they could get time off. So it's very interesting. The group that we were with was fascinating because we had, there was the coach of the New Zealand swim team, the Olympic swim team. And so the group was really fun to be with. But the fact that we shared this experience with friends who have kind of different views of things, and we could have nerdy conversations about heritability and stuff like that, was fascinating. So that's why we went. Yes?
I kind of want to be clear on the poisonous snake idea at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the third picture, that was the mimic.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you see, was it mimicking a pit viper? The poisonous snake that it mimicked?
The fer-de-lances are not pit vipers,
Okay.
I don't think. So they don't have an exaggerated triangular head.
Right. That's...
The main thing that they're mimicking is the pattern on their back. But that's
the thing that always stands out to me if I see a poisonous snake. I mean, definitely around here
right.
for sure.
Yeah, sure.
You always see that when you go, whoa, that guy's.
Yeah, there are a lot of poisonous snakes that aren't pit vipers,
Right.
Like coral snakes.
Right.
Things like that. But it's a good question. You should ask Harry.
Yeah. Okay.
Are they pit vipers? I should know.
Yeah, they
Are they?
are, but they have a skinny head.
They have a skinny head. Don.
Tom, what is your impression of the impact that we human visitors are having on the native flora and fauna of the Galapagos?
Well, I think we've had an amazing impact that's going to be, it's hard to really determine how great the impact has been. We released goats and we released donkeys and we released sheep and lots of things like that definitely had some grazing impact. And for plants, if 10% of the flora now, or circa 1968, was introduced stuff, that's who knows what the impact that have over years. Yes, you're next.
I was just curious, is there any light pollution or were the skies pretty clear? And that's the first question. Second question, any evidence of rising sea levels and impact to the islands themselves that you could see?
Rising sea level. These guys are really steep-sided for the most part. There could be some impact, especially at the decadal or centurion scale, but nothing really obvious. And as far as there are fewer than 20,000 people that live on the Galapagos, and there are only 3 settlements. The airport's probably the biggest source of light pollution, so it's not that big a deal. But that's not the final word. I mean, it's a good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did your bodies kind of acclimate to the motion sickness a little bit, or
we took we took motion sickness pills with us just in anticipation, and it was relatively calm. But you know, if you're not used to this, I would say take motion sickness pills or a patch behind your ear or something like that, because there were several of the passengers that had a major impact. Did anybody else want to add anything to that? How bad was motion sickness?
We had very little motion at all. A gentle rocking, and I really enjoyed that.
There were a couple of nights that, you know, we would go, and it made a big sound, you know?
Like that bulbs crack.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't 50 feet up and then smash, but it was. So unless you're, and you can't really escape it. So I would say take motion sickness pills, and if it bothers you, you take them, and you'll be fine. I wouldn't let that not allow you to go. Any other? Yes, Steve.
I was wondering if you have family members here that you could introduce today?
I have one family member, my wife, Mary Ellen. So this is, Mary Ellen is a school teacher and an equestrian teacher and horse breeder. And nobody else came. They're all out of town. Places like
Well, quite a lot of other people did come, and we thank you all for coming. Let's give Tom another round of applause.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.